Jake Paul. Let's go right into the
cancer.
I'm your host, Killer Keemstar. Let's get right into the news. Oh my God, Jake Paul also in the news. Jake Paul, everybody is going after Jake Paul. Fuck you and fuck the J Paulers. We have a ton of news for you today, but first, let's start off with the person who is becoming the biggest douchebag on the platform. The one, the only, it's everyday bro, Jake Paul. Now, our first story today is coming from, once again, Jake Paul. Our first story coming from Logan Paul. Our first story is coming from your boy, Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from the Pauls. Our first story is coming from Casey Neistat. Apparently today, he became a fan of Logan Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Now, our first story is about Jake Paul. Our first story is once again coming from Jake Paul. Now, here on Drumler, we've been talking about the chaos that Jake Paul. Now, our first story is about Jake Paul. Our first story, once again, starting with Jake Paul. This is the second drum alert we have uploaded today. There is so much going on. If you haven't seen the first one, make sure you watch it. Oh my God, so much juicy stuff in that one. But as I was filming the first drum alert today, the Team 10 house from Jake Paul, like I hate Jake Paul, Jake Paul exposed. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake Paul. That was good, Jack. I mean, obviously, that was Logan Paul, Jake Paul. We have on the line Jake Paul. Our first story today is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Logan Paul. Guys, we were going to upload an interview with Jake Paul's neighbor. Also in the news, Jake Paul's... Oh, my God! Jake Paul's ex-girlfriend, iDubbbz, to make a content cop on Jake Paul. Now, I've been telling you about this all week. We are going to be interviewing Jake Paul's neighbor. Now, our first story is very, very serious. We covered this last night on Drama Alert with a video titled Jake Paul, and we found out that he was from Jake Paul's area. And in the tags of her video, she had Jake Paul. We have a serious story for you today. Jake Paul, ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest story of 2017. Shit is going down. We uploaded a video earlier just talking about this breaking news. If you do not know what's going on yet, Jake Paul, you might be living under a rock, so just quick. Jake Paul yesterday uploaded a video. Now, the interesting thing about Calex's tweet is that Max from Team 10 liked the tweet. Also in the news related to Jake Paul. And now for our final story, Jake Paul. Now our first story is coming from Logan Paul. Now our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Now our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Well, it's not really coming from Jake Paul, but it's about Jake Paul, and Jake Paul got exposed so bad. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Guys, we have a crazy story that happened at the Team 10 house, you know, where Jake Paul lived. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from, you guessed it, Jake Paul. Holy shit, guys. It's possible that Jake Paul, there really isn't any news. And that's why I'm uploading this so goddamn fucking late, is because there was no news today. Now, our first story today is about Logan Paul and Jake Paul.
Anyway, our first story is coming from Logan Paul.
Now, our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Also in the news, Jake Paul, but YouTube is coming out with a new show that's very similar, and it's starring Jake Paul. Also in the news, Logan Paul. Now our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Oh my God, we got a big story for you. Jake Paul uploaded a video yesterday. Now our first story is more on this Jake Paul versus Rice Gum. Jake Paul. Now our first story is coming from Rice Gum, who has finally responded to Jake Paul. Rice Gum exposing Jake Paul. Oh my God, shit went down today. FaZe Banks said when this Rice Gum and Jake Paul, fucking Logan Paul and Jake Paul uploaded a video. All Jake Paul did today is upload a video. And speaking about Logan Paul's new house, now the last drum alert, we've been talking about this big beef between Clout Gang and Team 10. Jake Paul uploaded a video attacking Rice Gum. Rice Gum responded back, and then FaZe Banks uploaded a video going hard at Jake Paul. Herpes medication that was issued to Jake Paul. Now our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Logan Paul. On the last drum alert, we reported that Logan Paul, we have breaking news. This is huge. This explains the whole beef between Jake Paul. I told you if you were new to subscribe with notifications on, because the Martinez twins vid on Jake Paul uploading a video exposing Jake Paul. Now our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. But before we get into the list, we have some other news to get to. First up, Jake Paul. Our first story, Team 10, Jake Paul. Now our first story is coming from Jake Paul and Logan Paul. Now our first story is about Jerica. That's right, we're talking about Jake Paul. Yesterday here on Drum Alert, we told you about Logan Paul uploading a vlog. Now the first story that I would like to talk to you about is Jake Paul and Logan Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of aftermath of Logan Paul, but Logan Paul isn't the only Paul in the news. Jake Paul, ladies and gentlemen, YouTube has finally responded to the Logan Paul. Our first story is about Logan Paul.
And for this next story, oh, you guys are in for a treat. Okay, so I lied about that last part. It's Jake Paul.
God damn, it feels good to be back. Another YouTuber that is returning to the platform, Logan Paul. On last Drum Alert, we told you that Mr. Logan Paul, ladies and gentlemen, last week we told you Logan Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, our first story, Logan Paul. Our first story is coming from Logan Paul.
But guys, our first story is huge. So Logan Paul.
Jake, you're a fucking idiot. Jake Paul is a giant pussy. Logan Paul uploaded a video today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. Today, Jake Paul uploaded a video. Ladies and gentlemen, the day is here. KSI has officially responded to Jake Paul and Logan Paul. Breaking news today, YouTube has temporarily removed ads off of Logan Paul. Just a few days ago, Logan Paul uploaded a video. What will it take for YouTube to kick off Logan Paul? Also in the news, the boxing match between KSI and potentially Jake Paul, or KSI and Logan Paul. Jake Paul uploaded a video. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Listen, I'm gonna have a heart-to-heart with Mr. Jake Paul. You're a fucking pussy at Jake Paul. Also in the news, Logan Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a bunch of news for you today, but first, Logan Paul. Also in the news, Jake Paul is just being really fucking cringy.
What are those?
Our first story is coming from Jake Paul. Guys, this is insane. You are hearing it here first. This is actually going down. I'm telling you right now, KSI versus Logan Paul, and part of the reason why he's going to Las Vegas is this. Roll it.
What
But to kick off today's news, we've actually got a huge story concerning KSI and Logan Paul. First story today is from, and who could have guessed it, KSI and Logan Paul. But today's first story is massive. Look, there's no more speculation, there's no more guessing, and hopefully there's no more of this being a leading story. But today, in his daily vlog, Logan Paul, but our first story is hot, coming from none other than Jake Paul. But our first story is huge, having to do with none other than Logan Paul.
Now, our first story is coming from the Pauls. Oh my God, Jake Paul. Yesterday, we reported right here on Drama Alert that Jake Paul